Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 5 of Stand Up and Stand Out. Can you believe it? Already to Season 5? It has been a whirlwind year already. A lot has happened. You guys know after listening to Season 4 that I just launched Chameleon Mindset, my new book about how to embrace change and build mental resilience to transform your life and career. Lots more information, obviously, coming on Chameleon Mindset. We'll have the new online course coming soon. We've been doing lots of webinars, and I'll be on the road for the book tour. So hopefully I'll get to catch up together soon. Because why not just do another one? I have another book that just came out, The Great LeadHERship Awakening. In this book, I collaborated with 20 other amazing women. Each of them contributed a chapter talking about when their leadhership was awakened and part of their transformation, maybe over the pandemic or maybe over a longer period of time, really stepping into their power and showing what it means to truly be a leader. Welcome to Stand Up and Stand Out. We are here for Season 5. Can you believe it? And it is now April, which is National Poetry Month. That's a different month. National Poetry Month, and we have the amazing Lisa Clapper with us. Hi, Lisa. How are you doing today? Looks like you're in a beautiful spot to share your day with us.
Hey, Nikki. Hey, podcast peeps. I'm out here in West Sonoma, which is I'm borrowing the vineyard behind me for appeal, and it's great to be here.
Beautiful. So if you guys haven't checked it out yet, Lisa's chapter is Chapter 5. It's Finding Your Yay, Extended Play. Lisa Clapper is a poet who has walked the halls and edges of many an organization as a marketer, brand strategist, storyteller, and yay finder, somewhat in that order. She founded the Yay Collective in 2017 as a way to create and find more yay and collective in the world of strategy and storytelling. Thank you so much for joining us, Lisa. I'm excited. I really love that your chapter is slightly different and really just opens up your minds to what a chapter can be. Did you have a great time writing and collaborating in this, and what inspired you?
Yeah, it was so interesting. I've been on this sort of poetic journey since the beginning of the pandemic, and I think we could do an 8-hour podcast to talk about that, but I won't tell you the whole story. But suffice to say, when we couldn't do all the things we used to do, I found my way to a couple of different writing groups and started writing poetry. Although I didn't know I was writing poetry until some of the wonderful women said, I think this might be poetry. Did you know you're a poet? And I'm not going to make that, that classic rhyme about. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it's got rhythm. It's lyrical. It might just be poetry. So that's sort of what started, my actual practice of writing poetry. And when it came to the book, I had a friend who's actually a client. He's a coach. And how does he describe himself? A Buddhist, a meditation teacher. And he told me he was writing in another soul excellence book called The Diversity in Humanity, or The Humanity and Diversity. We'll double check later. And I went and checked out the website and I saw this book, The Great LeadHERship Awakening. And I said, there's something there speaking to me. Yeah, I'm like, wait, that got her in the middle, the awakening. This is interesting. Let me explore it. And so I just was like, as Kaylee, our publisher, might say, I was just called into this moment and I said yes to it. And then I thought, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to write? And how am I going to write? And what could I possibly write about of all the many stories, right, throughout my career and thinking about leadhership? And I thought, well, maybe I could write in poetry because that's what I do right now. And it was just mulling over many different stories of, actual work experiences and that sort of thing. And I had a moment with my writing coach. I give a shout out to Andrea Kanan. And I wrote this thing with her, and it had the line about, would you like to share your heart with me and bare your soul? And I read that to her, and I actually, I was like, whoa, it actually brought me to tears when I read it out loud to her. And I saw that, and she said, I think, you're actually saying, be your soul when you're with, you want people to be their souls with you. And so that was the beginning. That was sort of the heart, the crux of the chapter itself. And I do what we call I wrote into that. And I just sort of expanded out from there. And it had a lot of different, I don't know, phases and moments, and we can talk more about those. But that's sort of how it came to be. And I was like exploring the idea of, could I be this poet inside this book surrounded by wonderful authors like you and be the only one who wrote that way? And I decided that that was part of the leadership awakening itself, was to be fully that poetic self.
And it's great. It really is. It's amazing how all of us came together and just shared a piece of ourselves so vulnerably, which is what is important and uniquely. Each of us has our own voice and the own way that we're representing our story. And it was just really like, I've always wanted to do poetry. I'm more of a hip hop like rap artist. So that's my poetry, and I actually do like raps in order to practice for speaking events. I just love the chapter because I could hear the rhythm, of the words in there. And I love that it's 19 album tracks, like the way that you described it. Because I could really, like I said, hear the different songs within each one. And it really inspired me. And there was just a lot of really amazing nuggets in there that I liked. And one of the things is kind of you're introducing yours. You said that apparently even before we all took our unscheduled break from endless expectation of extroversion, it was exactly what you needed to write into the middle of your life. And I think that's such a key phrase right there, is that wasn't the end for most of us, right? It was just a stepping stone in the middle, and it all taught each of us something different, right? But most of it unique, a different experience you would ever have or plan to have in your life, right?
It's so true. And as a person, I mean, I imagine, I'm not going to like make a guess that you're an extrovert, but you strike me as a little bit of an extrovert, and I am too. But I found during that time, it was just, all the normal ways of connecting with people had disappeared. And even when we could, even when I went for a walk with a mask on and I tried to make eye contact with somebody, they just weren't having it, right? And, they just were like, when we used to cross the sidewalk to get away from each other. And I'm not trying to downplay the severity and all the lives we lost. I just want to make that really clear. It's a horrible thing. But there's a lot of things that can be birthed from that experience if we do live through it. And for me, having this unscheduled time to just write my heart out and write into whatever showed up, which could be, birds and just, with these sort of observations. I now live in West Sonoma County, but I used to live in the city in San Francisco. And so I would go out on the stoop and I would sit out there with my cats and I would write and I would just sort of observe what was happening in the world. And it's like there's a very present way of, sort of like a Mary Oliver way of just sort of interacting with what shows up and putting that in your poetry. I think that's a little bit of what I do.
And it's so important because I think that slowing down of our lives was actually incredibly important, because we were just go, 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 go. And you forget to simply just observe what's going on around you and appreciate what's happening. I like to call it our pandemic silver lining. What was the good thing that came out of some of this chaos? There has to be something, for us to really hold on to as we come out of it and learn from it. And hopefully, it takes us on to the next adventure after that.
And I think one of the other experiences I had, which in a way prepared me for that, what we did on the virtual summit, which is where we shared whatever we wanted to share. In my case, I decided, with the help of some of my other friends, to say, well, what if I read the whole chapter as a poetic performance? And you were talking about like spoken word and that kind of thing. And one of the things I got to do during the pandemic, and a little bit obviously after, was start to perform my poetry and get these 5-minute chances to tell a story. And so I started, what we would do in the writers' groups is we would write and then we would share what we wrote. And then we would give each other very positive reflections, like what struck us, what stood out. And then a woman named Molly Kittle has an event called Story, Connect with Story. We do the same thing there. So that was where I sort of got my performance practice and, all in my living room or wherever it was happening. But I really felt that the words that you write the words that get printed, the words that you say, they're all like different, slightly different versions of the same thing, but they come out differently. They're almost different modes. And so I really enjoy that part as well, as I imagine you do as a podcaster, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely the most extroverty of extroverts most of the time. But even I did appreciate, some downtime. But I do agree, even sitting down to write, it's one thing. And then I've recently been working on putting my book into an audiobook. And so even reading the words out loud and finding that cadence again, it's like, ooh, it feels like almost a different book, slightly different, right? It has a whole different emotion behind it. When even I choked up on my own stories when I was telling them.
And it's amazing how I also have this process where I write. So I write in, let's see if I can give you a sense of like, this is kind of how I write, like in colorful pens and different colors. And so in order to get that to be able to become this, it has to go through a process. So I record the audio using Otter, right? So, and then it transcribes. But then what I found was the audio itself was its own form of poetry and its own form of getting out the rhythm and the cadence and sort of figuring out what the poem needed to be. And then I would edit the poem from what I said. So it's like this whole like process of riffing on the poem and then turning the poem into something else. It's pretty fun.
I love that. And I think it's actually a great technique that writers, even if they're not doing poetry, can follow. Because when you say the words out loud, you can feel whether the right emotion is there, where the intonation is supposed to be. And it really strikes you. I think of all the tracks, track 2 is actually my favorite of yours. The refrains from begending. I even had to look that word up. I was like, ooh, I'm learning new words. I love that word too.
Oh, begending. It's actually a combination of beginning and ending. Begending.
Begending. See, kids, we're learning new words through this process too. It's important we're going. Just the way I read it to myself, and, I'm sure others could read it differently in their minds. And I'm sure, Lisa, you have your own interpretation. But I like there's like one stanza there's like, in converse, reverse, rarely terse. This is not a curse. It's a whole universe, inside verse. I love that one. I love the play on the words and, sort of a mix of rhyme with, similar types of, oh man, I just love it. There was so much about that whole track that was one of my favorites. So I just wanted you to know.
Yeah, I have this thing where I sometimes I look for the word, the obvious word comes in and then I look for a different word to mess with it a little bit and change it. And the rhymes, it's just, they come and sometimes they don't. And sometimes I just see what I can turn them into. But that idea of a whole universe inside a verse, I think that anytime we write, and particularly in poetry, which is in some sense everything, it's like a microcosm or macrocosm, the relationship between the two. It's nature, it's life, it's humanity, it's the universe. And it's a pretty fun thing to sometimes just stick that right in the poem,
Yeah, and I felt it. And there was a lot of great verses. I had some really favorite parts. When you talked about sort of reflecting on your career, one of the tracks that affected me was track 9 in Integrate. And I like the use of great sort of in there. But it was funny because I was actually just about to write an article about performance reviews and pay transparency and a bunch of these kind of heavy topics. But in that track 9, so the part goes, the bell curve requires we sort folks into buckets. Silos make us feel so low. Why do we need to rank and rate? And that just really struck me because it was always a part of my corporate job, which really, it never felt validated, whether I was the employee or the manager, that it just never did justice for the work that people were doing, the contribution they were making. And yeah, again, this sort of forced bell curve that we use oftentimes in corporate to rate everybody against each other. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikki Green, and I am a life and business resiliency expert. I have been helping people for over 2 decades overcome their challenges and achieve their life and business goals. I wrote Chameleon Mindset for others seeking clarity while acclimating to new situations. This entertaining yet research-based guide to transitions will open your mind to unique strategies for finding purpose and achieving your goals. Through my new book, you will create the happy life you desire with 5 philosophies for change, beginning with C for creative adaptability. Move from resistance to resilience by assessing and adjusting your risk tolerance. The practical lessons in Chameleon mindset will help you shift your mindset, sharpen your skill set, and overcome the things holding you back from dealing with change. We'll have the new online course coming soon. There are half a dozen modules in total, but the way you choose to pursue your destiny, it's up to you. Each module can be done independently or repeated as necessary to tackle new obstacles and new goals in your life. And you can earn extra Chameleon coins for uncovering them. What are Chameleon coins, you might ask? These are reward XP that you can earn to purchase additional Chameleon mindset benefits as you progress through the course. You can get swag, group coaching, one-on-one coaching, exclusive event tickets, and networking opportunities. And if you collect enough coins, you can even earn a full-day VIP intensive with me to work solely on your goals. And by joining the Chameleon crew, you will also gain access to my network of thousands of influential people around the world with expertise to help you on your business, your personal endeavors, health and fitness, and so much more. Reserve a copy today and click below to be added to our subscriber list. So maybe talk about your experience and how Track 9 came together.
Actually, Track 9 is interesting because there was this point Nikki, you remember we submitted, right? We had this date to submit, and our publisher, Kaylee O'Keefe, shout out to Kaylee, she said, well, I don't really used to editing poetry, so I don't really know what to do. But what she said to me, she said, I'm feeling a lot of pain in a certain section. I'm feeling this tone change. I'm feeling something, and I just am pointing it out to you. And she gave me that feedback, and I like to call that feed forward, because honestly, I'm just trying to work it in and go forward with it. And I took some time over the holiday break. I was like, well, I wonder if I could write into that in a different way. So it ended up being like this section. But what I want to say is I started my career after business school at Citibank in credit cards marketing. And I remember very distinctly this one performance review. And whoever my manager at the time was like, she's like, you're great, but we can't give you a grade because we have to fit you into here. So we're going to put you in the second category, right? So that like we have to sort people and we have a certain, amount of money and all that. And I'm like, I don't get that. Like I'm either great or I'm not great. And so I think that it's very complicated, performance reviews. There's a lot of stuff been written about it. And I don't think anyone ever feels good about it. I actually told someone a story earlier today about 360 reviews. And if folks know, like that's where you're asking people who've worked with you that you don't report to like give you survey you, right? And had this experience when that information came back, everybody was like, you're great to work with. Like we've accomplished so much together. And my boss at the time said, that's because you're friends. And I said, no, I didn't know these people before I showed up. And, you talk all about the toxic workplaces and the bullies, and I've worked for countless numbers of these people. I said, I became friends with them because mutual respect and achievement and how we work together. We are friends because of the work. We are not friends first. So if you don't get that, I don't really know how to change how you feel about it, right? But ultimately, performance reviews are just a mess and subjective, and they don't really allow us to integrate and feel great.
Maybe we can implement some sort of poetry part of this like 360 process and we'll get some more positive vibes going and some better rhythm and harmony between us all.
Absolutely. I mean, you want to be honest with people, but it just feels like that the silos and the buckets, they don't, if you haven't been around long enough or you haven't been raised in a way that you can like find your confidence within that, you're going to feel like, I'm actually worse. You're telling me that I'm not good enough. You're telling me something that it's hurtful. Really, it's not helpful.
It really is. And, so much of life is a journey and, you have some other really just amazing parts of the different tracks. One of the ones that I love just personally because I love turtles is part of track 19, Ending Rhymes with Reasons. And she wandered out there, greeting the tortoise, who came out of her shell, bringing her home wherever she goes, daring you to bring yours too, daring you to be yours too. And I love the metaphor because it's just what is home? It made us really redefine that a lot too over the pandemic. I think of like home has to be this specific place or, that it's always going to be positive. And it's like, no, you bring your home wherever you are, even when you're at work, you make friends, you build a community, you want to spend more time with them, you enjoy their company. It shouldn't be that like you just sort of clock in, clock out, and that's the end of it, because otherwise, what the heck are we doing here? That's kind of some of the pieces I took away from that. There's probably plenty of other inspiration for you, but
I mean, that turtle, right? That idea, you can look at the turtle in so many ways, right? The turtle has a shell that protects it and you can hide in and stick your neck in there. But the idea that we travel with our homes and each of us can make our home wherever we go, that there's probably like 3 or 4 songs. I think there's a Brandy Carlisle song, "Wherever is your heart is your home." And there's some other lines that "You are my home." There's so many lines about that, but the idea is very Brene Brown, right? And you can see themes of this in the way that where I talk about we don't fit, we belong everywhere. And the idea that our home, if we can look at ourselves as our home, then we will always be safe and we will always be welcome, even if people don't always get that we can carry and we can find that home, quote, on the road outside of ourselves. And then, the other part of that is my friend's been talking a lot about like molting with shells and crabs and lobsters. And we can shed that shell and sometimes we can be super exposed, right? As we're growing that new shell. And we don't want it to become armor. We want it to be a home and we want to invite people to molt and grow and be themselves with us.
I love it. So my first business I made was actually called Purple Turtle Events. And we did triathlon events in Southern Florida, and it was incredibly fun. And I worked with beginner athletes, and so we called them hatchlings, like hatchling turtles. And we really talked about this growth, right, of athletes, whether, you're 70 years old and just starting or whether you're 7, it didn't matter, that really helping it be an approachable thing for anyone. And now in my new Green Chameleon collective, I always try to use animals and colors for these visuals of things. And Chameleon is about that adaptation. It's about, putting yourself out there and making sure people know what you need. But I think, and you hit it just right there on that track 16 line, I don't fit, I belong everywhere. And I feel like that's super Chameleon because, again, we're not meant to be the same. We're not meant to be all alike. So let's stop trying to fit into everyone else's expectations. And instead, let's just belong everywhere. It's just a beautiful sentiment.
You just gave me a flashback to a place I worked where and we're like back to a performance review, and that line's in here as well, where like there's a few different parts of it, but I worked for this guy at the time and I love him. He was a great guy, but he was remote, so I was in LA and he was in Chicago. And so, I had a fair amount of independence, and I was this girl from New York, now working in LA in the late 90s, where it felt a little like formal and suity, and I had people answer my phone before I could even pick it up. And I'm like, it's just my husband. Why can I just pick it up? I know who it is. So it's stuff like that, right? And then, so this guy, John, he gives me my performance review, and it's like, oh, great. And then he writes one comment and it says, "I think Lisa's a bit too funky for Simon." And I'm like, yeah, I am. Right? I'm not wearing your khakis. I'm going to wear my sneakers with my dress and my Vans and like do my weird stuff. And if you want that, that's cool. And if you don't, we'll just, journey on out of here and take our turtle with us and become a chameleon that, I really loved when you were taking us through, right? The different ways to look at chameleon, not as changing your colors to lose yourself, but that you can like be all these colors and belong to yourself and also find ways to be a part of things, right? And I think that we all want.
And that's so important. It's such a key part of my message is I think for so long people were told to conform and not genuinely be who they were. And many, many people told me that too. Look at my green hair. So, always changing, always, just boisterous and active and full of energy. And it was always too much. And I'm saying it's okay. Be as much as you want to be. Be all the things you want to be, but also seek to understand as well. So you want people to understand you. So if you're not making that same open communication with them, and not just blocking everybody else out that's not like you, then you're not going to belong either. So it's finding that careful balance between those two things for me.
I love that because I had this is beautiful because you say things and then I have memories. And I had a woman who worked for me way back in the Gap days. And you can imagine that this kind of energy I bring to many situations. And it also means that I can fill up the space. I can take up space. And we would have, I remember meetings with roundtables, and she had her own responsibilities. And I don't know if it's because she's Canadian. She was so direct, but I loved it. One day after meeting, she said, I love everything about you, but you just don't necessarily give me space to share and talk. And if you could just not always be the one talking, that might give me a chance to do that. And I feel like I learned so much from her willingness to be open with me. And I feel like I am so nobody is perfect, but I feel like I'm glad that we had the kind of relationship that I could create where she could give me that kind of feedback and that we could both learn from it.
Exactly. It's really important. And I hope, through this book, through many other projects with both of us yet to come, that there's going to be just incredible, amazing transformations. And this is it. We just go with the flow now, guys. Before we had to be so structured and compartmentalized, and this is what I am and do at work, and this is how I am at home. We're not doing that anymore. We are in a hybrid life arrangement. It's no longer hybrid work, right? It's just really get out there, be ourselves, and blend together so that we can, experience really all that life has to offer.
Experience each other as these full human whole people, right? That, there are times when, we used to do that thing where we'd just be so worried. We were even talking about the tech wasn't working on this very podcast. And, if it was your job to run the meeting, you would feel so much pressure to get that right. And if you didn't, your boss would be talking to you about it afterwards. And the client wouldn't be able to pay attention to what you had presented. And I feel like luckily we live in a much more forgiving, graceful world, or at least we're on our way to.
We're making steps. Well, time flies when we're having fun. So if you guys don't know, Lisa has a podcast. It's called The Yay Show. It's the 4-way intersection of inspiration, revelation, observation, and possibility. So if you've loved her on our show, you can also head over and catch hers as well. Lisa, before we head out, any parting beautiful thoughts, things you want to share, and where people can reach you?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. This has been a blast. I really enjoyed it. I think that idea of the way that I end my chapter, my poem, is really that idea of please share your heart with me, with you, with everyone, and be your soul. I promise you, it never gets old. We don't fit. We belong everywhere. These are the in the pieces of the stories that make us whole. And thanks for being one of my cracks and pieces, Nikki Green. And you can find me at, all things Yay, but Yay Collective, YAY collective.com. That's my website, and on Instagram. And from there, you can find me in all other kinds of ways. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
Beautiful. And if you guys haven't picked it up yet, the Great LeadHERship Awakening is out now. You can get the ebook and the paperback, or both if you really love reading. Thanks everyone for joining us today for another episode of Stand Up and Stand Out. You know you can catch us where all the cool kids hang out that do podcasts on all the major platforms. And if you want to connect with Nikki directly, you can get a hold of me on my personal site, thenikkigreen360.com. There you can check out my website, you can see any of my new books, you can learn more about this podcast, and follow us on social. Can't wait to hear from you, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.